Hey Nalapup, can you pull up that video of Victoria Nuland overthrowing the democratically elected government of Ukraine? Can you do that for me? Yeah, go ahead and pull that up, please.
I think Yates is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Cleach and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week, So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, fuck the EU.
So the Maidan coup back in 2014 was a U.S.-backed, right-wing muscled, neo-Nazi enforced violent overthrow of the Ukrainian government that installed anti-Russian, pro-Western puppet government. But before we kind of dive into some of the details of that, let's listen to little Adam Schitt during Trump's impeachment talk about Ukraine and Russia.
Moreover, as one witness put it during our impeachment inquiry, the United States aids Ukraine and her people so that we can fight Russia over there and we don't have to fight Russia here.
You guys got that? Let's hear little Adam Schitt again.
Moreover, as one witness put it during our impeachment inquiry, the United States aids Ukraine and her people so that we can fight Russia over there and we don't have to fight Russia here.
All right, you heard it there. We're pumping arms in and doing a violent coup and doing all this stuff in Ukraine to fuck with Russia. He said it, not me. This is from the World Socialist website. Small summary of the coup. The 2014 coup in Ukraine. In February 2014, after months of right-wing Maidan demonstrations, Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych was forcibly removed from power by a coup. This coup was openly supported by U.S. and European imperialism and implemented primarily by far-right shock troops such as the Right Sector and the neo-Nazi party Svoboda. I'm so bad with pronunciation. Forgive me. The 2014 coup represented the temporary culmination of a long-standing efforts by U.S. imperialism to install a puppet regime on the borders of Russia. It brought the world a major step closer to a war between the world's largest nuclear powers, the United States and Russia. The regime change prompted the outbreak of an ongoing civil war in the east of Ukraine between Russian-backed separatists and the U.S.-backed Ukrainian army that has claimed the lives of tens of thousands and displaced millions. The Western-backed oligarchic regimes in Kiev have since imposed enormous austerity on Ukrainian working class, which now ranks as the poorest in Europe. In the U.S., the coup was a catalyzer for an ever more aggressive campaign against Russia and the Putin regime, and a significant shift to the right among layers of the upper middle class. U.S. imperialism has continued to fund the Ukrainian state and far-right forces with billions of dollars for the civil war in East Ukraine and further war preparations against Russia. The German bourgeoisie seized upon the coup as a pretext for aggressively stepping up its campaign to remilitarize and justify the crimes of fascist forces. I think Germany pledged to triple its defense budget or something like that. But let me continue. It is ironic that the tripling of the German defense budget is coming alongside the rise of Nazism in Ukraine. And they happen to be on the same side in that conflict. That is a sad state of affairs. For the first time since the end of World War II, representatives of a German government were seen on photos with avowed Ukrainian neo-Nazis. The last time that happened was the Holocaust of bullets. We'll go into that a little bit later. All right, so that last paragraph's just the World Socialist website sucking its own cock about how great they are. We don't need to read that. Democratic President Viktor Yanukovych that government was removed from power by a violent coup. The violent coup consisted of, some genuine protests that were real, and then tons of violent nationalists and neo-Nazis who were supported by the United States and armed by the United States. The right sector, Azov Battalion, these type of dudes. They ousted the Yanukovych government, and in its place, the United States placed a puppet government in its stead. And since then, that's only increased tensions with Russia and brought us closer to World War III. But let's continue. So this article here is going to go into some of the specifics of why we know it was a coup in 2014 and why we know the U.S. was not only involved, but, was pretty much orchestrating the whole thing. How and why the U.S. government perpetrated the 2014 coup in Ukraine. And this is, 4 years back. This is 2018 in June. And let's keep going. If America's successful February 2014 overthrow and replacement of Ukraine's democratically elected neutralist government doesn't soon produce a world-ending war, then there will be historical accounts of that overthrow, and the accounts are already increasingly trending and consolidating towards a historical consensus that it was a coup, that it was imposed by somebody from the new coalition, that the termination of the then existing democratic Ukrainian government wasn't authentically a revolution such as the U.S. government has contended, and certainly wasn't at all democratic, but was instead a coup that totally illegal, although it was backed by the West. So let's get into some evidence here. This is the first piece of evidence presented. Clearly, Victoria Nuland, U.S. President Barack Obama's central agent overseeing the coup, at least during the month of February 2014, when it climaxed, was crucial not only in overthrowing the existing Ukrainian government, but in selecting and installing its rabidly anti-Russian replacement. The January 27th, 2014 phone conversation between her and America's ambassador in Ukraine, Jeffrey Pyatt, was a particularly seminal event, and it was uploaded to YouTube in early February 2014. I've discussed elsewhere that call and its significance. Nuland there and then abandoned the EU's hope for a still democratic but less corrupt future government for Ukraine, and Nuland famously said on that call, "Fuck the EU." She also instructed Pyatt to choose instead the rabidly anti-Russian and far-right Arseniy Yatsenyuk. This key event occurred 24 days before Ukraine's president, Viktor Yanukovych, was overthrown on February 20th, and 30 days before the new person to head Ukraine's government, Yatsenyuk, became officially appointed to rule the now clearly fascist country. He won that official designation on February 26th. However, this was only a formality. Obama's agent had already chosen him on January 27th. So, piece of evidence one, Victoria Nuland selecting, the replacement to Yanukovych.
In terms of him not going into the government, just let him sort of stay out and do his political homework and stuff. I'm just thinking, in terms of sort of the process moving ahead, we want to keep the moderate Democrats together. The problem is going to be Tony Book and his guys. And, I'm sure that's part of what Yanukovych is calculating on all of this.
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Cleach and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week. I just think Cleach going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay. Good. Well, do you want us to try to set up a call with him as the next step?
My understanding from that call, but you tell me, was that the big three were going into their own meeting, and that Yats was going to offer in that context a 3-way, 3+1 conversation or 3+2 with you. Is that not how you understood it?
No, I mean, that's what he proposed, but I think just knowing the dynamic that's been with them where Klitschko has been the top dog, he's going to take a while to show up for whatever meeting they've got. He's probably talking to his guys at this point. So I think you reaching out directly to him helps with the personality management among the three, and it gives you also a chance to move fast on all this stuff and put us behind it before they all sit down and he explains why he doesn't like it.
Okay, good. I'm happy. Why don't you reach out to him and see if he wants to talk before or after?
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Okay, I've now written, one more wrinkle for you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Can't remember if I told you this or if I only told Washington this, that when I talked to Jeff Feltman this morning, he had a new name for the UN guy, Robert Seri. Did I write you that this morning?
Yeah, I saw that.
He's now gotten both Seri and Ban Ki-moon to agree that Seri could come in Monday or Tuesday.
Okay.
So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, fuck the EU.
No, exactly.
So there we have a peek under the hood of United States diplomacy and economic and military aid abroad. In the reality, it's clandestine imperialism. It's us creating a vassal state out of a sovereign nation in order to exploit it for its resources and use it as a staging ground to sell and stockpile our ammunition and weapons right on the border of a, nuclear armed country. The most nuclear armed country on the planet. What could go wrong? Another huge piece of evidence we have here was a phone conversation between the European Union's foreign minister, Catherine Ashton, and her agent in Ukraine, investigating whether the overthrow had been a revolution or instead a coup, Estonia's foreign minister, Nuland-Pyatt. And he told her that he'd found it had been a coup and that someone from the new coalition had engineered it, but he didn't know whom that somebody was. Both Ashton and Pyatt were shocked at this finding, but they proceeded immediately to ignore that matter and to discuss only the prospect for Europe's investors in Ukraine to be able to get their money back. Their obsession was Ukraine's corruption. Ashton told Pyatt that she had herself told the Maidan demonstrators, "You need to find ways in which you can establish a process that will have anti-corruption at its heart." So though the EU was unhappy that this had been a coup, they were far more concerned to protect their investors. In any case, the EU clearly wasn't behind Ukraine's coup. Equally clearly, they didn't much care whether it was a coup or instead what the US government said, a revolution. So another big piece of evidence is another phone call between an official from the EU and one of her investigators in Ukraine trying to figure out what happened in the Maidan demonstrations, the Maidan massacre, and the subsequent overthrow of the government. His investigation found that it had been a coup, that someone from the new coalition had been the one who had engineered it or had a huge part in the plot, but he didn't know who. They were both really shocked at that. And then immediately they moved right on, and their only real concern was, will Europe get any of the money that they loaned, Ukraine back, basically? Will the money people get their money back? Which goes to show that, another party independently found that it was a coup and that the EU, Europe, and sovereign nations have to bend to the will of the imperialist United States on a daily basis. So we know it's a coup. We know everyone has to bend to the will of the United States, and we know the West is wholly corrupt because their only concern is money. Let's get into more evidence here. The network behind this coup had actually started planning for the coup back in 2011. That's when Eric Schmidt of Google and Jared Cohen, also now of Google, but still continuing, though unofficially, as U.S. Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton's chief person tasked to plan, quote, popular movements to overthrow both Yanukovych in Ukraine and Assad in Syria. Now, I've made this connection to how this is similar to the dirty war in Syria. And here we go. Here's the connection right here. The U.S. State Department, Hillary Clinton, Google, all working together to overthrow sovereign governments the world over at the behest of the U.S. Government, the deep state, the military contractors. Let's keep reading though. Then, on March 1st, 2013, the implementation of this plan started. The first tech camp to train far-right Ukrainians how to organize online the mass demonstrations against Yanukovych, which held inside the U.S. Embassy on Kiev on that date, which was over 9 months before the Maidan demonstrations to overthrow Ukraine's democratically elected president started November 20th, 2013. So almost a year before the demonstrations, Hillary Clinton's handpicked people from Google to help these protests, these crazy neo-Nazis and ultranationalists in Ukraine, how to organize mass demonstrations against the government. A year before, like 9 months before. So we're learning how it's not grassroots, how it's astroturf, right? The American scholar Gordon M. Hahn has specialized in studying the evidence regarding whom the actual snipers were who committed the murders. So we're moving on to the Maidan massacre here. The height of everything during these demonstrations was this massacre in which a bunch of people were sniped out, were shot. Some high police officials, people in the crowd. The prevailing narrative from the West was, the Yanukovych government maybe had some violence to deal with, and then all of a sudden went insane and started massacring its own citizens. But the reality is something quite different, right? And it looks like this might be some United States diplomacy at action once again, let's say. So we're trying to figure out if, there was a bloodbath perpetrated by the Yanukovych government, or maybe there was a deeper, more sinister strategy at play here. So he has been specialized in studying the evidence regarding whom the actual snipers who committed the murders, but he focuses only on domestic Ukrainian snipers and ignores the foreign ones who had been hired by the U.S. regime indirectly through Georgian, Lithuanian, and other anti-Russian CIA assets, such as Michele Saakashvili, I don't know, bro, the ousted president of Georgia, whom the U.S. regime subsequently selected to become the governor of Odessa region in Ukraine. Hahn's 2018 book, Ukraine Over the Edge, states on pages, so he's quoting from the book here. Yet another pro-Maidan sniper, Ivan Bobenichik, emerged to acknowledge that he shot and killed Pre-coup. That's the police, the government police who were protecting government buildings. So he admitted in he killed the government police before any protesters were shot that day. In a print interview, Bubinchik previews his admission in Vlad Tiki's documentary film Brancy, that he shot and killed 2 Pre-coup commanders in the early morning hours of February 20th on the Maidan. Burbenchik claims that these Eastern European names have turned me into a Dr. Seuss tongue twister here. The Yanukovych regime stated the fire in the trade union house where his and many other Euro-Maidan fighters lived during the revolt, prompting the Maidan's next reaction. As noted above, however, pro-Maidan neo-fascists have revealed that the right sector started that fire. Analysis of the snipers massacres showed that the Maidan protesters initiated almost all, at least 6 out of a possible 8, of the pivotal escalatory moments of violence and or coercion. The 30th of November 2013 nighttime assault on the Maidan demonstrators is the only clear exception from a conclusive pattern of escalating revolutionary violence led by the Maidan's relatively small but highly motivated and well-organized neo-fascist element. So he's saying even the pro-Western people are admitting, yeah, there was maybe some snipers there doing something wrong, but they ignored the evidence of other foreign nationals who were hired by CIA assets to murder government officials. But let's keep reading. Although Hahn's book barely cites the first and most detailed academic study of the climactic coup period of late February, Ivan Kachanovsky's poorly written The Sniper's Massacre on the Maidan in Ukraine, which was issued on the 5th of September 2015, Hahn is consistent with that. Both works conclude that the available evidence, as put, shows that. So even though both these Western aligned journalists or authors ignored very crucial evidence in this author's opinion, they at the very least are both admitting that the massacre was a false flag operation, which was rationally planned and carried out with the goal of the overthrow of the government and seizure of power. It found various evidence of the involvement of an alliance of far-right organizations, specifically the right sector and Svoboda, and oligarchic parties such as Fatherland. Concealed shooters and spotters were located in at least 20 Maidan-controlled buildings or areas. So even these guys are admitting it was indeed a false flag. It was indeed an event, a false flag event, engineered to explode a coup, right? And they're admitting the alliance of two key factors in a shitstorm, which is the money people, the oligarchs, those parties, and the foot soldiers of racist fascism, which are neo-Nazis and ultranationalists, like the right sector or the Azov battalion. Hahn downplays the U.S. heading of the coup, but shortly before the coup, the CIA secretly trained in Poland the right sector founder leader Dmitry Yarosh, who headed Ukraine's snipers. So even the Ukrainian ones were working for the U.S. So if you're a little confused, let's kind of go into this a little bit more. We're going to read more, but now the story is looking like there was a bunch of snipers positioned all around the city that were trained and armed by the CIA, whose job it was to create this bloodbath and massacre. So the whole thing was engineered. They were there to kill protesters. They were there to kill police. They were there to kill people on both sides to ignite violence. So this government overthrow can look more legitimate, right? This is a very dirty game that the CIA is playing, but they're known to play this dirty game. On the 19th of November, 2017 was issued, I can't deal with all the names in this, so I'm just going to continue without names, and you guys can fucking look some shit up if you want to look into more of this. Was issued The Hidden Truth About Ukraine Parts 1 and 2. Summarizing them here, two Georgian snipers say Saakashvili hired them in Tbilisi for a U.S.-backed operation, but they only knew about the Georgian Legion part. So they only knew a small facet of the overall operation, and it was as follows. They think it was patterned on Georgia's Rose Revolution. They each got $1,000 for the operation and flew into Kiev on the 15th of January and were promised $5,000 upon their return. We had to provoke the Pre-coup police so they would attack the people. By February 15th, the situation at the Maidan was getting worse every day. Then the first shots were fired. It was February 15th or 16th. So their job was to go there, and their specific job, those specific snipers, in their small part of the operation that they knew about, was to go and shoot police. Mamunashvili, Saakashvili's man, introduced them to an American military guy, Brian Christopher Boyinger, a former sniper for the 101st Airborne Division, who after the Maidan, these are in quotes, so this is this guy's story. A former sniper for the 101st Airborne Division who, after the Maidan, he went to Donbass to fight in the Georgian Legion. But during the coup climax, so American military looking like black ops snipers are training these snipers for this coup event, and then they're going on to fight with fascist forces in the Donbass region of Ukraine. All right. But during the coup climax, the far right, Andriy Parvivi, came very often, and Brian always accompanied him. So this sniper guy was always seen with far right leadership. And also instructing, there was Vladimir Parasuk, one of the leaders of the Maidan. And there you go. So this sniper guy, right-wing leadership, and one of the leaders of the protest, often seen together by these two snipers. The snipers were told not to aim, but to just kill people randomly, to create chaos. There were also 2 Lithuanian snipers in the room. Some went down from the Ukraine hotel to the second floor of the conservatory building balcony. They started to take out the guns and distributed them to each group. Then I heard shots from the next room. It lasted 15 minutes. Then they were all ordered to escape. On 13th February 2015, there was a telecast of the German documentary, Maidan Snipers, German TV expose, ARD monitor, English subs, whatever. So this is a German TV expose, Maidan Snipers, in which one of the demonstrators said that many of the bullets were fired from buildings controlled by demonstrators, but that we were also shot at from the other direction. However, at least before 21 February 2014, police were seized by demonstrators, and at least the possibility exists that some of the right sector snipers were taking positions in, and especially atop, some of the government buildings so as to fire down into the crowd and seem to be firing from Yanukovych's side. Gordon Hahn hasn't been able to verify any firing in February 2014 by the Yanukovych government. Moreover, they were the same snipers killing people from both sides. So no one's been able to prove that Yanukovych actually fired on his own citizens, but there's plenty of proof that these United States trained snipers were taking up positions on both sides to fire down from both directions to incite a massacre, to incite bloodshed so they could overthrow a government, so money can be made and sabers can be rattled. So in 2016, in February, was a French documentary on YouTube, Ukraine, Mass of the Revolution, which shows from a meeting at Davos, Victoria Nuland, the announcer trying to speak with her and saying to the audience, the U.S. diplomat who came to support the revolution. Could she really ignore the existence of the paramilitaries? It also shows Larry Summers at the meeting in Kiev during September 2015, and then later at the 12th Yes annual meeting, saying Ukraine is an essential outpost of our fundamental military interests. Petraeus also shown there, and the announcer says he also thinks that Ukraine is essential to block Putin. Petraeus urges investment in Ukraine to block Russia. Petraeus is a high-ranking U.S. general. McChrystal, also a high-ranking U.S. general there, also urges arming Ukraine. Nuland is there, and the announcer says this country that is the most invested in Ukraine's future is the U.S. She is the architect of America's influence in Ukraine. Nuland says there, at the Yes meeting, we had a significant impact on the battlefield, but the U.S. regime blames Russia for that war. So in this video, in this French documentary, we have a bunch of top American diplomats and generals, all getting, all being exposed in 4K, all their ties to this coup, how admitting all the interest the United States has in arming Ukraine, saber rattling, trying to provoke a war with Russia in Ukraine. Whereas U.S. propaganda still treats the matter as if Russia is what threatens Ukraine, that's not generally the case in the propaganda by other governments. So this is kind of sad. This is when the rest of the world was still a little more neutral. Now, more modern events have made it so the rest of the world is now kind of in lockstep with the United States. But let's read this anyway. Even UK propaganda now commonly acknowledges that a more overtly fascist, even Nazi takeover of Ukraine's government is what mainly threatens the people of Ukraine. The US regime and its massively deceived population are being increasingly isolated internationally, and so the US government increasingly stands out as the world's leader of fascism, and even as the leader of fascism's racist form, which is Nazism. But still, what continues to be effectively prohibited throughout the U.S. and its vassal nations is public acknowledgement that the U.S. perpetrated a coup in Ukraine and overthrew Ukraine's government in February 2014, and that replaced it with a Nazi anti-Russian regime and thereby started the current Cold War, which is much hotter than the U.S. side acknowledges or allows the public to know. That last sentence is very key. It is all our fault. And for years, they didn't tell you shit about it until Putin finally reacted, and now this is all you hear about. Isn't that ironic? Here's some Azov Nazis. They're really proud of their NATO membership. There's their Azov flag, and there's the Nazi flag. Look at them. Sieg Heil, right? He's also heiling Hitler. He's embarrassed. He's you can't see this guy in the end. He's doing almost like he's like a 13-year-old girl in a TikTok. Jesus Christ. These are the people we've been arming and training. These aren't all Ukrainians. The regular Ukrainian army isn't like this, but these are the people that we empowered and trained and forced their puppet government to be in coalition with, because it greases the wheels over here, as Sam Sear would say. You know, and make sure the money people get their money, and make sure the weapons get sold, and make sure we're we're starting a war with Russia, a new Cold War, so we can, increase those nuclear budgets. We can build more nuclear submarines. There's so much money to be made by saber rattling with Russia. There is a historical context here as well of the Holocaust. So Nazis, I just showed you the Nazis, but look at the historical context here of these Nazis. The Holocaust by bullets in Ukraine. The Holocaust in Ukraine represents the first phase of the Holocaust, in which an estimated 1.5 million Jews were shot to death at close range in ravines, open fields, and forests. This is the author. Based on present-day borders, 1 in every 4 Jewish victims of the Holocaust was murdered in Ukraine. In the history of the Holocaust, the summer and fall of 1941 are especially significant because they represent a period of critical escalation. In a matter of months, mobile Nazi killing units, which had begun shooting all adult male Jews during the invasion of the Soviet Union, expanded to include a genocide targeting women, children, and entire Jewish communities. Before the killing centers opened in Birkenau, Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, and so before the concentration camps opened, more than 1.5 million Jews had been murdered by the Germans, their Axis allies, local collaborators in Ukraine, Belarus, and other republics of the Soviet Union. These were the first victims of the Holocaust. They were not transported by trains to the famous killing sites in Poland with their gas chambers and crematoria that typically characterize the Holocaust in the minds of most people. Instead, these Holocaust victims, were taken from their homes, usually by foot, to the outskirts of their cities, towns, and villages, where they lived, and they were brutally shot face to face or in the back, often in the presence of local residents and non-Jewish neighbors. The mass shooting of Jewish victims in the summer and fall of 1941 represents the first phase of the Holocaust, often referred to by historians as the Holocaust by bullets. It was during this initial phase that German killing squads coordinated the mass murder of Jews by bullets with the help of the SS, Wehrmacht troops, the Romanian military, special operational squadrons, order police units, and local collaborators.